I want to weigh in into the conversation that I recently picked up online. Links in the show note, and shout out to the people who actually talk about this. And it's about the risk of AI and a social backlash to AI. That's in a nutshell what the subject is about. I mean, it's a bit more complex. People talk about the singularity and the risk and the regulatory backlash and regulatory capture. So there's a lot more complexity to this problem. But I just want to look at it from the perspective of power and envy and jealousy, things along those lines. Like if you have companies already now, like Nvidia, for example, which are dominating a space, there's a lot of envy, there's a lot of losers, there's a lot of people who think they should get a piece of the pie. And there's this idea, this concept that maybe maybe it's too much, and there could be a backlash, and there are thoughts out there, and again, links in the show notes for people who are interested in the sources. I don't want to get mingled up with names here, but I also don't want to take credit for all this, so I just want to make sure everything is clean here. What I'm trying to say here is that there's conversations out there about the need to on the one hand, regulate AI because it's going to become too powerful and too big, concentrated in a few hands. But also, I think this is not my addition to it. Just jealousy and envy. I can see it here. I'm sitting here in Silicon Valley, exposed to the VC and academic community in the Bay Area, and I can see some envy and jealousy towards Nvidia because they are capturing a lot of the value of AI. Not all of it, and there's definitely some other big companies that are capturing value too, particularly Microsoft and OpenAI. But nevertheless, if you're a VC and you're investing in all these startups, and you're probably making okay money, but then you have trillions of dollars created by one company, you're kind of looking a little bit like, why am I doing this? So having said that, I guess my point is the following. I think everything in investing, particularly when you invest the way we invest at Orange Capital Partners, and that is we definitely want to do things that have large impact. And we also have the illusion, maybe we're wrong about this, but we do want to do good things, right? It's on our website, go read about it. We have this mission to generate wealth by investing in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices with large impact. That's the mission of Orange Capital Partners. But there's an underlying tone here also towards trying to be more proactive in really adding to social values, like making the world a better place for future generations. Let's leave it at that. And in order to achieve that, I think we have to be conscious about how we invest. I'm going to talk about that. And I'm also going to try to give some examples of what it means to invest along the lines of improving society versus not improving. This is not even on podcast. It's June 2nd, 2025. This is Krim Delco. For the year, we are down 11.9%. The markets are 1.1. They're underperforming by 13%. So I want to start with a concept from Peter Thiel, and that is, and I'm paraphrasing here. I don't know the exact details. It's from 0 to 1. So I'm paraphrasing. And it's the PQ concept, P over Q. P is the value you add to society. Q is the value you capture for yourself. And P over Q, now this is me saying, should be at least 10, if not higher. So that's a mathematical way to solve this problem. I think as long as you can add 10 times more value to society than you're capturing for yourself, you will be able to prevail, whatever you do, whether it's AI, whether it's nuclear power, whether it's, you name it. And the reason is, this is not very scientific, but you can think about it this way. If you can create trillions and trillions of dollars of social value, there's just going to be a lot of people on your side, whether they like it or not, because they're benefiting from your innovations. So for example, the way we see the world going with AI is that yesterday I listened to an interview or a TED talk actually by the CEO of GitHub, links in the show notes. He's talking about how coding is being revolutionized. This is just an enormous value add. Just ask your teenage son or daughter how they're doing with their coding assignments in high school, and they will tell you, well, it's not that hard anymore. We can actually code in English almost. Take another example. Take robotics, which is being the second order effect of robotics now is that you can actually really invest in robotics because you have the ability to do reinforcement learning in simulation. So generative AI, which is the first order effect, is enabling a second order effect, which is reinforcement learning in simulation, which will enable robots. Self-driving cars is just the beginning. We'll have robots doing a lot of things that we shouldn't be doing, don't want to do, and that we don't even know we can do. Exploring the ocean, sea, stuff like that. Going to Mars. Optimus should be the first human-built intelligence that goes to Mars. So having said that, again, like if you create a lot of value for society, you just have a lot of fans and they will support you. So I think this P over Q concept is incredibly important because there are companies that don't do that. And, I don't want to mention specific names, but let's say there's predatory capitalism, which is still very prevalent in our society. For example, insurance companies, they actually, at best, add zero value, probably even have negative value to society, but they capture some value. So this ratio is very, very bad with insurance companies. And who likes insurance companies? Have you ever met somebody who is proud of working for an insurance company or that their kids go work for an insurance company? There's a reason for that. Take companies, healthcare, like healthcare again. Healthcare researchers, cancer researchers, they should be the highest, getting the highest accolades in our society. Why don't they get the highest accolades? Why don't public health officials get the highest accolades in our society? Aren't they protecting us from pandemics and things like that? Well, they don't. And I don't even want to go into that conversation, but the last 5 years have shown that there's something deeply wrong with our public health and medical sector and pharma sector. And therefore the value to society that they add is again probably negative, but the value they capture is very high, and therefore we don't like those types of professions. Now, people want their kids to go become doctors, but that's not because they're proud of being in that profession. It's more because it's a safe profession. In fact, it's almost a perverse relationship there because they're able to capture so much value without really adding any value. It's kind of a convenient way to make a living. But I don't want to go into more details here. All I want to say is that if you're in a sector, and I think the reason Silicon Valley has been tolerated for a long time is because the P over Q is very high. Now it's becoming a little bit tricky now. People are starting to question, the backlash against Silicon Valley, for example, in the left-wing artist elite. Just recently I saw an interview with Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he's attacking Silicon Valley, actors, people like that. And the question is, okay, well, what's wrong with that? I mean, why are you against all this? And I think there's a little bit of a fear. There's a little bit of a sort of uncomfortable. Also, these are older people, so it makes sense. Older generations tend to be negative towards new ideas. Talk to younger people; they'll be much more open because it's their future that we're building and their future that is being enabled. So having said that, now, when it comes to our portfolio, we're having large investments in Tesla and Nvidia. So we have to ask ourselves, first, is this still a good investment from an economic perspective? So are we adding Q? And then also, how much P are we adding? Because we want a P over Q to be more than 10. So we don't have backlash. We don't want this to become like a stopper where they say, you just can't do this. And when it comes to economic value, I think this is sort of the traditional DCF and things like that. And I think we've spoken about this a lot. And the purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. So we want to make it very clear that we find valuations are important as an intellectual exercise, but they cannot be decision making arguments for buying or selling a company. That's not a good idea because your valuation cannot be trigger. It can be maybe it's a bit like deciding. It's a bit like deciding maybe what major you want to study. Like you're not going to do it net present value of computer science versus English. I think that would be very bad. But of course, you want to have a bit of a sense for how much money you can make, how much money you're paying. But there should be many other aspects towards it. Wealth is as much about valuation as astronomy is about telescopes. It's an old phrase used in many other fields. What I'm trying to say here again, of course you need a valuation to do wealth management or investing. The same way you need telescopes to do astronomy, but certainly astronomy is not about telescopes. So hopefully this analogy works. So now when it comes to P, the social value, I think Nvidia particularly is adding enormous amounts of social value. We also see an enormous amount of social value added through Tesla. I mean, that's part of the reason why there is a backlash against Tesla, because they're disrupting the car industry. They're going to disrupt oil. They're going to disrupt unions and labor with their Optimus. And that's all good because these constituencies are sclerotic when it comes to our society, and they're really making our future generations suffer because they don't have a better future than we had, and that's a bad thing. I think that is failure on our society, I think the boomer generation has failed in that sense. The boomer generation, the hippie generation, the people that were at Berkeley in the 60s and 70s, they have failed us. The people that I grew up around that were 10, 15 years older than me, and that were listening to Led Zeppelin and long hair and all of that, they have failed us because we have 40 trillion in debt. We have a system which is sclerotic. Our political system is collapsing, and we have an economic sclerosis that fortunately is being upheld through innovation in Silicon Valley, but everything else in the country is actually sclerotic. So we need to change that. And I think these types of innovations, some of the most important innovations, which are AI, which are space, which are robotics, problems in those areas that are being solved on the scientific front, on the technical front, and on the entrepreneurial front, those will open up huge markets and huge opportunities for our youth, and therefore the P is very high. And we believe that the P to Q ratio is actually much, much higher than 10. So what does that mean? For example, if we take a company like Tesla, and we think that Tesla in, let's say, by 2030 will be a $3 trillion company, they will add more than 30 trillion in actual value to society. How do we calculate that? Well, if you take, for example, the time saved just by driving, we have 3 trillion miles driven in the United States. There's huge numbers, enormous numbers, and you take 20-30% of that. You take the time that is wasted, the accidents, the cost, the insurance cost. It's a very, very big number. You can look at it also the other way around. We pay, let's say, $1.50 per mile today. If you pay only 50 cents per mile, and again, we drive trillions of miles, so you bring down the cost of transportation. I'm not even talking about convenience. I'm just talking about hard numbers. Then that will open up a lot of opportunities. You could think of second and third order effect. Second order effect could be that with robotaxi, we have much more flexibility in real estate. People can actually live in different places. So it's a lot easier to live in the suburbs. It's a lot easier to live somewhere where the rent is a little bit cheaper. Because you could even, you could commute for an hour or two. It's not such a big deal. You can work in the car, you can sleep in the car. It's not ideal, but there are opportunities along those lines. So similar to when Eisenhower built the highway system, now Musk is building a sort of intelligent highway system, which will definitely open up opportunities. Optimus will open opportunities on the labor front. We can do a lot more with less, so produce more things. And therefore have more flexibility. Also, AI, I think the biggest advantage that we see in AI is really the ability to simulate physics and therefore do reinforcement learning and other AI concepts, particularly reinforcement learning with physical objects, and therefore really innovate and iterate much faster, because every kind of disruptive technology in the end boils down to iteration. The more you can iterate at lower cost and error correct, the faster you innovate. So to summarize, P over Q more than 10, that's the key. That's how we see our investments. We are comfortable with Nvidia and Tesla. There's many others, of course, but these are our main portfolio companies. That's why we're still invested in them. That's why we're so optimistic about them. And we believe that the social conversation around them will be okay as long as P over Q is more than 10. And that is the case. Thank you.